Welcome to this week's edition of the Construction CPA's Coffee Cafe. I am the Construction CPA, Lisa Raish. We are dropping the hammer on cash flow problems so you can build things that matter. All right, so our theme this month is going to be WIP reports, backlog, and project pipeline visibility. And we hear this all the time. My P&L says I'm profitable, so why does my cash feel tight? Chronic problem across the board in construction, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that because this week's topic is going to be why your WIP reporting matters more than just your profit and loss statement. So we see it all the time. Clients are looking at their P&L, their profit and loss statement. They think they're making money, but your bank account is telling you a completely different story. Super common across the board in construction. You will not be the first and you won't be the last if this is happening to you. So we're going to talk a little bit about today. We're going to talk about your P&L, and it doesn't always tell you a full story. And that's why we're going to need your WIP as part of that to kind of start to fill out the overall story to tell you what's really going on with the projects that you're working on. So why does this matter, right? We talk about this a lot. Why does this one topic, why does your WIP matter, which is your work in progress or your work in process, right? Why does that matter? Because your profit and loss is going to show your overall performance, right? But it's not timing or it's not job level accuracy, right? So it's showing you entity level. So if you're running 5 or 6 projects right now, you've closed out 5 or 6 already, it's not telling you overall. It's telling you your P&L says this is what's going on overall in your entity. It's not saying, hey, project 87 is, off kilter and why, right? That's the stuff that you really need to start to dial in on in construction is your actual projects, not just the entity level P&L, but it's that project level P&L. So, you're project based, right? So we talk about job costing, project costing, same, right? Same basic thing. And so because we're doing that, it's not always steady or even income, right? You're not going to be invoicing out flat. You're not going to be collecting money flat, right? There's going to be a lot of like peaks and ebbs and flows in that. So again, it's not just the one thing. You've got a lot of different things moving. So when we talk about cash flow challenges, I'm always going to say it's not one thing. You're typically going to have 4 or 5 different things going on that will ultimately create that issue. So without actually keeping track of your WIP, you don't actually know if you're profitable. You could be losing money on projects. You just don't know. Whereas in the aggregate on an entity level, you might be doing well, but you don't know 2 of the 8 projects that you've done have lost money because you've not tracked that. And so when you're making your decisions on incomplete financial data. You're taking half the story and you're trying to build something off of that, make decisions off of half a story. You're not going to get the result you're looking for. So your P&L, your profit and loss statement, is going to tell you what has happened. And your WIP is going to tell you what it actually is accurately, right? On the project level. It's not entity level. So again, your entity level is important, but in construction, it's the projects that are far more important. So what are some of the real reasons why your P&L falls short in certain areas, right? So your revenue isn't always earned when it's recorded. So for example, your billing doesn't always equal the revenue you've earned depending on how you have what your schedule is. So that can be an issue, right? It's not always, and again, it's not always flat. You don't always earn 1/6 of the project every month, right? You could be doing a lot in this month and a lot in the next, right? So you run into those challenges. If you're overbilling, right? You've billed too much, it makes your profits look inflated because you've billed too much, but you don't have a lot of expenses. So hey, the project looks profitable. And you could also underbill where, we've spent, that's really hiding the performance on your project as well, because now it's going to be the opposite side of it. We haven't billed as much as we should have, but we have tons of expenses at this point. So maybe the project doesn't look profitable, right? So you're going to have both sides of that coin happen with the over and the underbilling. Your costs and your revenue don't always match in timing. So timing is a very big thing in construction. You know, your expenses don't necessarily hit when your revenue is recognized. So, for example, again, if you are on some sort of milestone type of project, you could be in this month and have a lot of expenses that hit, but based on the terms in the milestones, you're not actually invoicing or earning revenue until maybe sometime next month, because that's when you're actually hitting that milestone. So again, these things, we try to match them as well as we can, but they don't always match directly up on that P&L. That's why that WIP report becomes so important. If you have some of your projects that are still in progress, it will distort your P&L because you've got closed projects. So, ones that are completely done. So what are the results are there. You also have partial projects in there, which can, again, if you've underbilled or overbilled somewhere along the line, that throws off your results as well. And it will just, in many cases, will create some misleading profits or loss. And it just kind of swings month to month, right? And so you're not getting that entity level P&L is very helpful for certain things, but it's not telling you the true story of what's going on in your business. That WIP report is going to be far more accurate and telling you what's going on. So, many of you can't even see the job level performance, right? So again, we've got a company-wide P&L. I can see at the end of this one, you're 6 months through the year, and overall entity level, this is what your performance is, but it doesn't give you a picture into what is actually happening in those projects, right? So it's not project specific. In many cases, if you have a problem job, it gets buried in with all the other numbers. So you might have had some really great projects, but maybe you've had one that just didn't go well, and you're losing money on it, or you lost money on it. But in the aggregate, when it's mixed up all together with all the other projects, you'll look like you're doing well. Where, you could have learned something from that one project that you've lost on, but when you don't have accurate figures to work off of, you don't know that, hey, I really need to be learning from what happened on this project so we don't do it again on the next one, right? And so when that happens, it's really hard to catch issues early. You end up finding things long after a project is gone, right? And so that's why that project level, that WIP report, that project level financials are so important. Entity level is important too, but really digging into each one of those projects is incredibly important. There's always going to be a cash flow disconnect. So, your P&L might show that you're profitable on paper, but you have zero cash. Why do you have zero cash? Well, because you've got a ton of receivables sitting out there that haven't paid you, right? There are all other things happening that are flowing into that profit and loss statement, which are giving you a kind of a disjointed view of what's actually happening there. Your overbilling and underbilling is going to impact your working capital, always an issue. And you can't make your decisions on profit alone, because if you're doing that, you can in turn create cash flow problems down the road, right? So again, we talk about over and over again, a lot of the challenges you have in your business are not one thing. It's typically going to be a snowball effect of a number of different things. So again, just saying one simple thing like, oh, well, if, the profitability is the problem, from beginning to end, not necessarily. There are going to be other things that you need to look at and make sure that you understand when you're looking at overall like profitability and cash flow in your construction business. If you're not keeping track of your WIP, you have no visibility into what comes next, right? Where are you in a project? Your profit and loss statement is going to be backward looking, right? So we're looking at history, what has already happened. When you're actually looking at the WIP, there's still that ability to look at what is going to happen moving forward, right? And so that becomes just as important as that history, is what's going to happen in the next couple of months based on what this WIP report is telling you. If you're not keeping track of your WIP, you don't know what the project status is, what remaining costs do you think are going to be out there. So it's hard to predict your cash flow moving forward if you don't know where you are in a project. There's risk there. You don't know what you're going to collect potentially from what do I have left to collect from the actual customer? You have just a lot of lack of visibility. You're just kind of groping around in the dark at that point. So you're left reactive, right? There's no proactivity in there if you're not keeping track of your WIP report. It's just simply reacting to what has happened to you. And that does not make for, an easy way to run your business. And it's very hard to make decisions when you're reacting to things that have already happened to you. So your WIP report really can start to change a lot of things for you, because your WIP report is going to show you a lot of different things. So it's going to show you your true profitability on a project, not just what you build out, but your actual profitability on that project. It's going to show you if you've overbilled someone or maybe you've underbilled someone, right? You want to make sure you understand what that position is and how is it going to affect anything moving forward. It's going to show you your percent completion, right? How far along in this project are you truly? What are your remaining costs? What do you have to spend still on that project in order to complete that project? Again, it's all planning. Where are you going to be doing the balance of that project over the next 3 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it is? And so you're not able to predict that remaining cost to you, but also the remaining that you have that you're actually going to be able to bill out. And your WIP report is going to give you a real-time financial position on each of your projects. When you're looking at that aggregate P&L, you're not seeing all of the different projects. You're just seeing one big pile. Again, there could be 5 partially completed projects in there with 8 fully, but you just don't know, right? So why does all of this matter to you? Why do you need this WIP report? It's going to give you clarity on whether you're truly profitable on these projects and not just a timing issue. You've overbilled, you've underbilled, you've not recorded expenses, you've spent more money and you haven't billed, right? All of those things don't give you clarity on what's going on with those projects. It helps you with getting surprised at the end of a project. Nobody wants to get surprised at completion of a project that you've invoiced everything you could and you're still spending money and there's no money coming in, right? Or vice versa. It's going to help you to improve your cash flow planning. It is very hard to plan where your cash is going to ebb and flow if you can't say where in that project you are and what you have left to spend. It becomes very hard to do any kind of cash flow planning, right? Trying to do that 13-week, which we do a lot with clients, that's hard to do if you don't know in 5 weeks we're going to be this far into this project and we're going to need to do X, Y, or Z with it, which is going to incur, so much in expenses to do all these things. You can't even map that piece out. And that's why it's so important that you keep track of these projects. And again, at the end of the day, it just comes down to basic decision making. If you don't have enough information, it is very hard to make good quality decisions. And if you're making decisions off of half of the information, in many cases, you aren't going to get the results out of it that you were hoping for. So again, your P&L, your profit and loss statement, is just a snapshot. Your WIP is your work in process, is going to give you a full story behind each of the projects, not just half a story, or again, a story out of this eye and then, out of that lens over here. They tell very different. The WIP is going to tell you a much clearer picture of what's going on in your business. All right, so what are some of the things that you can do right now? We're talking about these actionable tips that you can do right now. First, do not rely on your P&L alone, right? You have to be using that WIP report alongside that P&L, because the two of them together are going to tell you what's going on. It's not going to be just one. You need to look at both of those together. It's going to give you better insight into what's going on in your business. You want to be looking at that WIP regularly, at the minimum on a monthly basis. It is a lot easier to catch issues at month 3 than it is at month 9 when the project is done, because it can get very costly between month 3 and month 9. And it's easier to get ahead of it when you can see it in advance. You want to understand, based on that WIP, if you've overbilled or you've underbilled, right? Where is your cash going to ebb and flow? Where are you going to get impacted? And is there a risk somewhere along the line? Right? Are you going to find yourself at the end of the project with no dollars to collect and still spending money on the project? Those are the things that you want to make sure that you catch in advance. You want to track your job progress because you're going to need to be able to estimate the cost to complete that, right? If you're so far into this project, I still know that still need to spend, this line item, that line item, and half of that line item. That is going to help you to determine what you're going to be spending moving forward. Again, planning out your cash flow, right? Because those future costs are just as important as the ones that are happening to you right now. What's going to happen to you in 6 or 8 weeks? Again, when your cash is doing this, you want to make sure when it takes this dip down, where is it going and how far down is it going? Is it going to get you into a place where you have a challenge? You want to use your WIP to guide you in making your decisions, right? It's not just this report thing that you look at and it's like, oh, okay, this is this thing. It's like the profit and loss statement. Clients look at it and like, oh, okay, it's this thing and there's a number at the bottom. It's a tool to be used with the other tools in your financial tool belt. It's not just some report thing that gets prepared. It really is all of these reports used in conjunction to help you make better decisions. It's not just, sometimes people, clients feel that it's just just another task that we have to do, but it really is going to give you insight into where you are with your projects. So, your P&L alone by itself can unfortunately mislead you. You need other tools and other reports to look at when you combine them together. So it's going to be that WIP reporting, right? It's going to help to give you clarity into what is going on in your business. Now, I also like to throw in the balance sheet to look at as well. That, that's for another day. We hit one topic at a time here. But, it's not just looking at one thing in a silo. You've got to start to bring all those things together because you're going to need them, because you're going to want to see your true job performance. Where is your cash ebbing and flowing, and where do you have any potential risks in your business? So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking about things like backlog, right? So what do you have in your backlog? Knowing, when things are coming can help you to plan, not just planning the revenue, but it's going to plan your staffing. You want to be able to take on that additional backlog so that is healthy growth, that you can get ahead of it. And it's not just, growth that falls on your head and now suddenly you have to deal with the mess that comes with it. So in the next couple of weeks, we'll be talking about things in more detail, backlog. So that's a really important topic, goes right along with that WIP report. Again, looking at that WIP report and that profit and loss statement. So I look forward to seeing you here every Friday. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week.